Hey, garden lovers. I'm so excited to share something with you today that's going to totally change the way you grow your veggies. Seriously, if you've been struggling to get your plants to grow strong and healthy, you'll want to stick around for this. I'm about to reveal the $1 trick that completely transformed my garden, and trust me, you won't believe how simple and cheap it is. Now, before we dive into all the juicy details, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I promise you won't want to miss out on more gardening tips and tricks that'll take your backyard from blah to beautiful. Okay, so let's get into it. If you're a fellow plant lover, you know how frustrating it can be when you're putting in all that effort, watering, pruning, making sure they're getting enough sunlight, and yet your veggies aren't growing the way you want. I've been there too. I planted tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, and all kinds of herbs. I was doing everything right, or at least what I thought was right. I mean, I read all the gardening books, watched the YouTube tutorials, and followed all the advice. But despite my best efforts, my plants were barely growing. I was getting small, sad-looking tomatoes and wilting lettuce that didn't seem to thrive no matter how much I cared for them. I was frustrated, honestly. I even thought, maybe I'm just not cut out for this. Have you ever felt that way? You plant something with hope and excitement only to have it fall short of your expectations? It's disheartening, and I was seriously starting to lose my love for gardening. I didn't want to give up, though. I mean, who doesn't love the idea of picking fresh veggies right from their own garden? So I kept researching, trying new things, hoping to find a solution. That's when I came across this crazy simple tip that turned everything around. And you won't believe this, it only cost me $1. Yep, just one single dollar. When I first heard about it, I thought, there's no way that's going to work. How can a $1 trick possibly make that big of a difference? But out of sheer curiosity, I decided to give it a shot. And I'm so glad I did because, well, it worked. My garden went from looking sad and sparse to lush and bountiful almost overnight. The cool thing is, this trick is so simple and effective, anyone can do it, whether you're a seasoned gardener or just starting out. And the best part? It doesn't require any fancy equipment or expensive fertilizers. It's all natural and cost-effective. In fact, I'm almost embarrassed by how easy it was. So, what's the trick? I'm about to spill the beans. But first, I need you to hit that like button if you're excited to find out how you can turn your garden around without spending a ton of cash. Alright, let's get into it. The secret is compost tea. Don't worry if you've never heard of it or thought it was too complicated. Okay. So, before I get into the game-changing secret, let me take you through what my garden life was like before I discovered this $1 trick. I know some of you can probably relate to this. You're excited, you've got your gardening gloves on, your seeds ready, and you're all pumped up to grow your own fresh, delicious veggies. But then, well, reality hits. I remember planting my tomatoes first. They're such a classic, right? And who doesn't want to grow their own juicy, homegrown tomatoes? But as the days went by, something didn't seem right. My plants were growing so slowly. The leaves weren't as green as I expected, and the tomatoes themselves, tiny, unripe, and almost pathetic looking. So I thought, okay, no problem. Maybe they just need more water. So I watered them more, but still, they didn't seem to be improving. I even tried giving them extra sunlight, moving them around the yard to the spots that had more exposure, thinking that would help. But nope, nothing changed. It was as if they were stuck in slow-motion growth, and it was so frustrating. I'd watch my neighbors' gardens flourish while mine just sat there, barely moving. And then came the lettuce. Oh, the lettuce. I love having fresh greens for salads, but it felt like no matter what I did, the lettuce leaves would just wilt away. I'd try adding fertilizer to the soil, but even that didn't seem to help. Some days I'd look at my lettuce and think, maybe it's just not meant to be. I started thinking that maybe I just wasn't cut out to grow anything beyond a cactus, something that's nearly impossible to kill, right? But I couldn't give up. Gardening had always been something I loved. There's something so satisfying about watching a tiny seed grow into something you can actually eat. And I didn't want to let the dream of homegrown veggies slip away. So, I kept researching. I went to the garden center, bought some more soil, tried out a couple of different fertilizers, all in hopes of giving my plants that extra push they needed. Nothing. Still the same old slow growth, sad veggies, and me feeling more and more discouraged. One day, I sat outside staring at my garden and feeling defeated. I was wondering if I was wasting my time. But then, something told me to keep looking for a solution. That's when I started doing deeper research, watching more YouTube videos, and reading articles about soil health, plant care, and all sorts of gardening hacks. And that's when I came across something that caught my eye. This $1 trick. It sounded too simple, too easy to actually work. But after everything I'd tried and failed, I figured, what do I have to lose? So I took a deep breath and decided to give it a shot. I mean, if it didn't work, I wasn't losing much, right? $1 wasn't going to break the bank, and I was ready for anything at that point. Little did I know that this simple trick would be the answer to all my gardening problems. All right, here it is. The moment you've all been waiting for. The $1 trick that turned my garden from a sad little patch of plants into a lush, thriving paradise. Are you ready? Drum roll, please. It's compost tea. Yep, that's it. Compost tea. Now, I know what you're thinking. What in the world is compost tea? It might sound a little strange, or maybe you've heard about it and thought it was something too complicated or expensive. But trust me, it's not. It's one of the easiest, most cost-effective ways to give your garden the nutrients it needs to thrive. And all it takes is a little compost and some water. So, what exactly is compost tea? Simply put, it's a liquid made by steeping compost in water, kind of like how you make tea but for your plants. When you brew compost tea, you're allowing all the beneficial microorganisms, nutrients, and microbes in the compost to mix with the water. This liquid becomes a superfood for your plants, providing them with the natural nutrients they need to grow big and strong. It's like giving your veggies a nutrient boost without having to spend a fortune on store-bought fertilizers. The best part? It's incredibly simple to make, and if you already have compost or can get it cheaply, you don't have to spend more than $1 to make a batch. Here's how you can make your own compost tea. Take about a cup of well-aged compost. The older, the better. You want compost that's broken down and full of nutrients. Fill a bucket with about 5 gallons of water. You can use tap water, but if you've got rainwater, even better. Put the compost in a mesh bag, old sock, or even a pantyhose. Just something to keep the compost in one place so you can strain it later. You don't want the solids getting into the water, just the liquid. Place the compost-filled bag into the water and let it steep for about 2-3 days. Some people even stir the mixture every day to help the microorganisms break down and really get into that water. But even if you don't stir it, it will still work. After 2-3 days, remove the compost bag and strain out any remaining solids. Now you've got a nutrient-packed liquid ready to pour over your plants. Here's the cool thing. Once I started applying compost tea to my plants, the results were almost immediate. Within just a few days of watering my veggies with this homemade solution, I started seeing some serious changes. My tomatoes started growing faster, and not just faster. They were fuller and plumper than I'd ever seen before. The lettuce, which had been wilting away before, started growing fuller leaves that were a rich, vibrant green. And don't even get me started on my herbs. They went from being small and struggling to practically exploding with flavor and size. The growth was so noticeable that I couldn't believe it. And you want to know the best part? I didn't have to spend tons of money on expensive fertilizers. I was getting all these amazing results for just $1. That's it. $1 for a game-changing solution. All right, now that I've shared the trick, let's talk about the most exciting part. The results. When I tell you that compost tea changed my garden, I'm not exaggerating. The difference was so dramatic, I almost couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, we're talking about plants that were barely hanging on to suddenly becoming healthy, vibrant, and full of life. First, let's talk about my tomatoes. Before I started using compost tea, my tomato plants were struggling. They were stunted, with tiny, underdeveloped tomatoes that seemed like they would never ripen. But after just one application of compost tea, things started to shift. Within a week, I noticed the plants growing faster. The leaves were greener and fuller, and the tomatoes that had been tiny and stubborn started to swell and ripen. By the end of the month, my tomatoes were bigger, juicier, and bursting with flavor. I couldn't believe how quickly the transformation happened. It was like they'd been rejuvenated with a shot of plant vitamins. And the lettuce? Oh man, the lettuce was a huge win. Let me tell you, before compost tea, my lettuce was more of a maybe kind of plant. Some of it was barely hanging on, while the rest just looked sad and wilted. But after applying compost tea, it practically came to life. The leaves became larger, healthier, and they were a beautiful shade of green. I even started harvesting more than I ever thought I would. Fresh salads every day? Yes, please. But let's not forget about the herbs. My herbs were thriving like never before. I had planted basil, thyme, rosemary, and parsley, but they were all struggling to grow. After using the compost tea, those little herbs exploded with growth. My basil, in particular, went from being this sad, tiny plant to a large bush full of thick, fragrant leaves. I could barely keep up with it. The parsley also flourished, and I had more rosemary than I knew what to do with. It felt amazing to walk into my garden and see these herbs thriving, ready to be plucked for cooking whenever I wanted. Here's the kicker. I didn't spend a fortune on fancy fertilizers. I didn't have to buy special plant food or organic solutions. I spent $1 to make the compost tea, and it worked wonders. And it wasn't just me. I've shared this trick with friends and family, and they've seen similar results in their own gardens. It's the kind of solution that feels like a hidden gem, something simple and effective that can truly help any gardener, no matter their skill level. Now, you might be wondering, is it too good to be true? Well, let me tell you, this is one of those gardening hacks that actually lives up to the hype. Compost tea is all natural, easy to make, and incredibly effective. So if you're tired of struggling with your garden, or you just want to give your plants a little extra boost, I highly recommend giving compost tea a try. You don't need any fancy equipment, and you definitely don't need to spend a lot of money. Just a little compost, some water, and you're good to go. Before I go, don't forget to hit that like button if you found this helpful, and share this video with anyone who could use a little gardening magic in their life. If you've tried compost tea or have any other gardening hacks, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear how it worked for you. Thanks for watching and happy gardening.